In today's video, I'm going to give you guys a really powerful build for the Sorcerer class, and I'm of course also going to dip into a few of the Warlock spells. Now there is no multi-classing yet in early access, so this is not a true Sorlock, but this is as close as we can get using everything that Larian has given us. Keep in mind that this is an early access specific build, so when the game comes out and we get access to higher levels, it will change things up a little bit. And one more thing, make sure to stick around to the end if you actually want to do this build, because that is when it starts to really become what it's truly meant to be. And I'll also throw in a few things that you can do that are insanely powerful. Like, it's really crazy. All right, let's jump right in. For this build, I'm going to play as a half-elf in min-max with 16 in dexterity, constitution, and charisma, leaving a measly 8 in strength and intelligence, and a 10 in wisdom to help a little bit with saving throws. Feel free to spread out the points a little bit more than I did, but charisma 16 I would say is a necessity here. I will be taking a feat at level 4, so this is your one chance in early access to get that +3 modifier for your spellcasting ability, charisma. The higher your charisma modifier is, the more likely it is that your spells will hit their targets, and they will also have a better chance of their intended effects being carried out. Dexterity is going to boost your armor class number and also help with your initiative rolls, and Constitution is going to boost your hit points and help you hold concentration on concentration spells. For your racial choice, half-elves are the most optimal choice here, as they allow you to boost your 3 primary ability scores, but other races such as the drow, humans, tieflings, and lightfoot halflings will also do just fine because they all have boosts to charisma. For my subclass choice, I'm going with Draconic Bloodline, giving my sorcerer Draconic Resilience. Draconic Resilience boosts your hit points by 1 per each level, and it also increases your base armor class by 3 when not wearing armor. If you gave yourself a 16 in dexterity, you will now have a 16 armor class at the start of the game and not ever have to use the mage armor spell. For my Draconic Ancestry choice, I will be going with White Cold, because it's going to give me the Armor of Agathys Warlock spell. Armor of Agathys will give you 5 temporary hit points, and it will also deal 5 damage to enemies that strike you in melee combat. Cast it immediately after each long rest and just let it be. For cantrips, you get to choose 4, and I would recommend starting off by choosing Firebolt and Ray of Frost. These 2 cantrips deal decent damage, with Firebolt coming out on top, and choosing both of these will also give you some variety in elemental damage, allowing you to work the environment to your favor. I would personally include Dancing Lights here to ensure that no enemy is ever truly hidden in darkness. And although not combat focused, Friends is a great choice, as it makes the Sorcerer even more potent in dialogue. If you don't care about Friends, Shocking Grasp is also a decent choice, as it will allow you to deal melee damage and also walk away from an enemy without taking an opportunity attack. It's basically a riskier disengage that deals damage. For spells at level 1, you get to choose 2, and one of them is a really easy choice. Chromatic Orb is one of the best spells in the game right now, and it deals great damage while also allowing you to choose an element for the spell. So if you're fighting an enemy that is vulnerable to fire damage, use the fire-based Chromatic Orb and deal 2x the damage. The Thunder Chromatic Orb option does the most base damage, coming in at 3d8, which increases to 4d8 when cast as a level 2 spell. Pretty powerful for early levels. All of the other element choices do 2d8 damage, and upcast to 3d8 at level 2, which is less damage than the Thunder option, but these options also do splash damage on the ground, allowing for some AoE damage opportunity. Your second spell choice is really up to you, because for this build I will be replacing this spell with another one at level 4. If you don't have any idea what to pick here though, you can never go wrong with Magic Missile, as it doesn't miss. At Sorcerer level 2 you get sorcery points, which will be mostly used for your meta magic, which I'll talk about in a minute. You'll start off with 2 sorcery points, but by level 4 you will have 4. Keep in mind though that you can use the feature called Create Sorcery Points to sacrifice spell slots for more sorcery points. Or you can do the opposite and use Create Spell Slot and sacrifice sorcery points for more spell slots. Having these features can absolutely come in handy depending on the situation that you find yourself in, so don't forget about them. At level 2, we also get one of the Sorcerer's main features, Meta Magic, and we get to choose 2 Meta Magic options. The best choices for this build are Distant Spell and Twin Spell. Distant Spell will cost you 1 sorcery point, and when you use it, it increases the range of compatible spells by 50%. When you distant a spell, most enemies will never be out of your range, but you will be out of their range, giving you a tremendous advantage over an opponent. Twin Spell allows you to split a spell or cantrip into 2. So if you twin your chromatic orb, you fire off 2 chromatic orbs in 1 turn, and even better yet, it only uses up 1 spell slot for the 2. Twinning a spell will cost you 1 sorcery point per spell slot level used, so if you twin a level 2 spell, it costs you 2 sorcery points. Cantrips still cost 1 point. Keep in mind that you cannot twin spells such as Magic Missile and Shatter, as it only works on spells that target 1 creature at a time. So for this build, you'll primarily be using it with your chromatic orb. For your spell choice, I would personally go with Thunderwave, as it can be one of the most powerful spells in this game, a game with a ton of verticality that you can use to your advantage. Thunderwave can completely turn the tide of a battle in your favor, so don't be afraid to use it. Thunderwave can also be upcast to level 2, and this gives you more freedom with your spell usage, something that I'm looking for with my choice of spell at this level. At level 3, you get to choose another meta magic, and the list of choices has been expanded. An easy choice here for this build, and I would say currently a little overpowered, is Quicken Spell. Quicken Spell makes a spell that takes an action now cost a bonus action. So you could now quicken Chromatic Orb, casting it with your bonus action, and still have an action left to cast an entirely different spell. Or you could quicken the level 2 Shatter spell when you get it, and then cast another Shatter spell with your action. Keep in mind that both spells will use up a spell slot respectively, and using Quickening Spell also costs the hefty 3 sorcery points. Now there is a chance that this may be nerfed in the future to be more like 5th edition, where you can't cast 2 level 1 or higher spells on your turn. Instead, it might have to be a spell and then a cantrip, or a spell and an action like dash or disengage. But if Larian changes it to be like that, this is still a powerful combination. At level 3, we also get to choose our first level 2 spell, and there are many great choices here. I would recommend picking up Misty Step, as it's one of the most useful spells in the game in my opinion. Now you could find the Misty Step amulet, but I like to keep magical items out of these build guides. Misty Step allows you to teleport to an unoccupied space that you can see up to 60 feet away, and the best thing about it is that it costs a bonus action rather than an action, so you can teleport and attack in the same turn. This is super useful for positioning and also escaping dangerous situations. Level 4 is where this build really starts to get interesting. For your cantrip choice, I would either take Shocking Grasp or Friends, depending on which one you haven't picked up yet. For our spell choice, I'm going to pick up Shatter, as Shatter is one of the best AoE spells currently in the game. Shatter deals 3d8 thunder damage to creatures within its circle, but creatures that pass a Constitution saving throw will take only half the damage. This spell absolutely wrecks mobs, and when a good situation presents itself where several enemies are grouped up, do not be afraid to use it. Cloud of Daggers is also a great AoE spell, but it does require concentration, and I'm saving my concentration for a different spell. I'm also going to take advantage of being able to replace a spell, and with this I will swap out Magic Missile for Scorching Ray. You'll see why this is so powerful here momentarily. Scorching Ray fires off 3 rays, and you control where each individual ray will go, and each ray deals 2d6 fire damage. Unlike Magic Missile though, these rays each do their own attack rolls, so they can miss, but the damage potential with this build makes it worth the trade-off. Instead of taking the classic ability score increase and boosting your charisma to 18, we're instead going to take a feat. This feat will of course be Magic Initiate Warlock, which will give us 2 more cantrips and a choice of a first level spell from the Warlock spell list. In the current version of Early Access as of November 1st, 2021, patch 6, the Magic Initiate feat actually seems to be broken a bit, but in a way that makes the player really powerful, and I'll show you what that is at the end of this video. I don't want it to be a part of this build, although you will probably be taking advantage of it. For your Magic Initiate cantrips, be sure to pick up Eldritch Blast. It does the same damage as Firebolt, however it does do force damage, which is the least resisted damage type in the game from what I can tell. So this will likely become your main go-to cantrip. Your other cantrip choice is completely up to you. For your Warlock spell choice, you're absolutely going to take Hex, and this is where the build becomes really formidable. Make sure to stick around for this entire section of the video as there is a lot to talk about. So the main use of Hex is to cast it on an opponent, which does require concentration, hence why we didn't take other concentration spells. And when you deal damage to that hexed opponent, they will take an additional 1d6 necrotic damage. It's similar to how Hunter's Mark works. Hex also only costs a bonus action, and when a hexed enemy dies, you can reapply it to another enemy at the cost of just a bonus action. And when I said it only costs a bonus action, I meant that literally, because when taking Hex with a Magic Initiate feat, it does not use up one of your precious spell slots like it does when you get it naturally with the Warlock class. The catch here though is that Hex can only be used once per long rest, but hang in there with me because this is what is actually broken. But don't forget that when a hexed enemy dies, you can reapply the same Hex to another enemy, so most of the time you will have it up and active as long as you can hold your concentration. So how about the damage potential that Hex brings to this build? Think of our new spell, Scorching Ray, which fires off 3 2d6 missiles. Well, Hex's 1d6 damage bonus will apply to each of Scorching Ray's missiles that hit their target. This gives you the potential to deal 54 damage if all of your rolls go perfectly. Now imagine that on a target that is also vulnerable to fire. Also, don't forget that you have Metamagic Quicken spell, and with the way that the game currently is, you could quicken Scorching Ray and cast it twice in one round. The damage potential is insane. And if you want to get even crazier, you can twin Hex, casting Hex on 2 separate enemies, and then on the next round, quicken Scorching Ray and cast a full Scorching Ray on each of the hexed opponents. Obviously, you won't be getting perfect damage all the time, but generally speaking, this combination is extremely powerful. Hex does not work with Magic Missile, hence why I got rid of it, because Magic Missile does not do attack rolls with its missiles like Scorching Ray does. Nor does Hex work with spells that cause the target to do a saving throw, such as Shatter. So with this build, it will work great with Scorching Ray and Chromatic Orb, which you will be using a lot, and also many of your cantrips. Many of you will also notice that you can cast Hex in 6 different ways, each one corresponding to a certain ability. Don't really worry about the way that you cast it because you're only really using this spell for the 1d6 damage bonus, which works with all 6 ways. In the video description, I'll do a brief paragraph explaining why you may consider using a different one over another one, but for the most part, even myself, I just cast the first one that I click on. So that is the core of what this build is, and I think many of you guys are going to greatly enjoy it. It's extremely powerful. But let's quickly talk about what's broken about it, and this comes down to the Magic Initiate feat as a whole. I am assuming that this will be patched in the future, so keep this in mind. When you take the Magic Initiate feat with any class, the spell that you choose with it recharges with a long rest, as opposed to it costing you a spell slot. This is supposed to limit the spell's use because it's not your primary class's spell. What it actually does though is it allows you to use it more than the actual class that gets the spell naturally. If you take a spell that has more than one icon associated with it, such as Hex, which as you can see has 6 different ways you can cast it, or a spell like Chromatic Orb if you are taking Magic Initiate Sorcerer, the game's current programming looks at each of these icons as their own separate use of the spell. So with this build, if you use Hex Charisma, you can still cast Hex 5 other times before needing a long rest, and that would equate to 5 combat encounters for many of you. With Chromatic Orb on a different character where you're not playing a sorcerer, you can cast 6 Chromatic Orbs and not use up a single spell slot. Like I said, I'm sure that in the near future this will be updated to where you can only cast a spell once, regardless of whether or not it has different variations to it. So to summarize this sorcerer build, you're going to be a rather beefy sorcerer with good hit points and a decent armor class for a sorcerer. You have a few warlock spells that you will absolutely be making use of, with Hex being your concentration spell. Chromatic Orb will likely be your most used damage spell as it allows you to cast it in a variety of different elements, and you can cast it as a level 1 or level 2 spell. Scorching Ray will be there when you need some crazy damage potential. Shatter is your deadly AoE spell that will not ruin your concentration. Thunderwave is a more situational spell, but I would say it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. and Misty Step is the best spell for positioning and also escaping danger. With your meta magic choices, you can cast cantrips and chromatic orbs at insane distances. You can twin many of your spells into 2, hitting separate enemies. And you can also quicken spells, allowing you to cast 2 separate spells in 1 round. In my opinion, this build is one of the most deadly builds that you can do in early access. And don't forget that sorcerers are also charismatic, so you're going to be better in many dialogue situations than many other classes in the game. And that will be it for this Sorcerer, Warlock, whatever the hell you want to call it, guide build video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. I really do appreciate that. These videos take quite a while to make, as I try to use good music and script things well to make things easy to understand. And I also try to get visuals to represent everything. So thank you guys so much. Let me know your opinions and things that you've tried with the Sorcerer class or maybe even the Warlock class below in the comments. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.